All right, so today we're going to pull back the curtain on a piece of computer history. We're talking about a utility that was once an absolute ritual for PC users, but has kind of faded into the background. It's the story of Microsoft's Drive Optimizer, but you probably know it by its old school name, Disk Defragmenter.
Oh, yeah. If you had a Windows machine back in the 90s or the 2000s, this screen right here probably gives you a little bit of a flashback. For so many of us, defragging was just part of the deal, right? It was that thing you'd set to run overnight, hoping it would magically fix your slow computer. And you can't talk about defragging without talking about the visual. That grid of colorful blocks just slowly, painfully putting themselves back in order. It was like watching a digital puzzle solve itself. You felt like you were actually healing your hard drive in real time.
But what was really going on behind that hypnotic display? What problem was it really fixing? And maybe the bigger question is, why don't we even talk about defragging anymore? I mean, where did it go? Well, that's the mystery we're going to solve today.
Okay, first things first, we got to talk about fragmentation itself. To get why this tool was ever needed, we have to understand how those old hard drives worked and why, over time, they just felt like they were crawling through mud. The best way to think about it is like a library. Imagine every file is a book. When everything's new, the whole book is in one spot on one shelf. Easy. But as you save and delete stuff, it's like pages from that book get torn out and shoved onto different shelves all over the library. That mess, that's file fragmentation. Now, to read the book, your poor librarian has to sprint all over the place just to find page 1, then page 2, and so on.
And on an old mechanical hard drive, an HDD, this wasn't a metaphor. It was a physical reality. There was a little mechanical arm that had to physically zip back and forth across these spinning metal disks to find all those scattered pieces. All of that physical movement, that seeking, took time, a lot of time. And that's what made your computer feel so incredibly slow.
Which brings us to what I like to call the watching the blocks era. This is the one you probably remember. The iconic, super visual, and, yeah, often super frustrating tool from the early days of Windows. What's kind of wild is how late Microsoft actually was to this party. I mean, look at this. IBM had a tool like this way back in '82. For more than a decade, if you had a Microsoft machine, you were on your own. It wasn't until '93 that they even bothered to include one, and get this, they just licensed it from Norton. The graphical icon we all know and love, that didn't show up until Windows 95. And this quote, this right here explains the frustration. You could kick this thing off, let it run for hours. But if anything, and I mean anything, changed a file in the background, the whole process would just stop, rescan the entire drive, and then try to pick up where it left off. It was a massive test of your patience.
So as we move into the mid-2000s, things start to shift. With Windows Vista, Microsoft basically said, you know what? This whole defragging thing shouldn't be the user's problem anymore. And just like that, the tool went from being this manual chore to a totally invisible background task. The new way of thinking was set it and forget it. Defragging just got scheduled to run automatically. It was designed to use very little power, so it could just hum along quietly in the background, and you'd never even know it was happening. And they even took away the colored blocks. This confused a lot of people at the time, but it was totally intentional. Since the whole point was for it to be automated and invisible, Microsoft didn't want people obsessively watching it and messing with a process that was supposed to just take care of itself. But here's the plot twist. Just as the defragmenter was getting really good at its job for those old mechanical drives, a completely new technology showed up and changed the entire game. I'm talking, of course, about the solid-state drive, the SSD.
So what's the difference? It all boils down to moving parts. An HDD is mechanical with that physical arm and spinning disks. An SSD, though, is pure electronics. It's just a bunch of flash memory chips, kind of like a giant USB drive. No moving parts means it can grab data from anywhere on the drive almost instantly. And because of that, file fragmentation has basically zero impact on its speed.
So that leads to the big question, right? If fragmentation doesn't slow down an SSD, what in the world happens if you run that old defrag tool on a brand new one? And the answer is pretty shocking. It's not just useless, it's actually bad for the drive. You see, SSDs can only be written to a certain number of times before their memory cells wear out. Defragging is just moving massive amounts of data around for absolutely no speed benefit, which means you're just burning through the lifespan of your drive for no reason. So the old tool had a choice. It could either evolve or it could become totally obsolete. And what Microsoft did was pretty brilliant. They made the tool a whole lot smarter.
turning it into the modern, smart optimizer that we have today.
Starting with Windows 8, the name officially changed to Drive Optimizer. And this was more than just a rebrand. It was a signal that the tool was now media aware, which is a fancy way of saying it was smart enough to know what kind of drive it was talking to. So here's how it thinks now. First, it automatically figures out what kind of drive it's looking at. If it sees an old school HDD, it says, okay, you need a good old-fashioned defrag, and it does that. But if it sees a modern SSD, it does something totally different. It sends something called a trim command.
So what on earth is trim? Well, it's not about reorganizing files. Think of it more like sending in a cleanup crew. It's an instruction that tells the SSD, hey, all these blocks of data over here, the user deleted them, so they're empty now. This lets the drive clean up those empty spaces on its own time, which keeps it ready to write new data at top speed. It's a cleanup command, not a reorganizing one. And this table really just puts the whole 30-year adventure into perspective. I mean, it went from a simple tool that Microsoft had to borrow from another company, to the visual icon of the 90s, to the invisible background worker, and finally to the intelligent adaptive optimizer we have today. It's a perfect little story of how software has to evolve right alongside hardware.
So the story of the Drive Optimizer is a pretty cool reminder that even the most mundane-seeming tools on our computers have these really rich hidden histories. It just goes to show how much is constantly adapting and evolving right under our noses. It kind of makes you wonder, what other forgotten tools on your machine have a secret story just waiting to be told? Thanks for joining me.